I'm very happy for the privilege of being able to speak to you. I've got, over the years, I've been in Youth for Christ. I work for Youth for Christ in Sri Lanka and been with them for 46 years now. And over the years, I have got a lot of gentle rebukes from my friends, especially friends in the West, saying that I'm working too hard. And they fear that I will end up with burnout. I have thought about it a lot. And because of this, and also because I'm now working, I stepped down from the leadership of the ministry 11 years ago. And now I'm working as a mentor to our young staff and to pastors, to people of other organizations. So that's my full-time job now. And I see the dangers a lot. So I decided I'm going to write a book on it, and Secrets of Long-Term Freshness in Ministry. And this is what I will share today and tomorrow and day after, just 2 chapters of this book. I've asked the question, does hard work lead to burnout? That's the question that I've asked often. And I fear that idea has come from a fast-paced society that is where success is measured by celebrity status, and people are driven to succeed following unbiblical measures of success. And that plus the problem of insecurity that all of us struggle with. We all struggle with some sort of insecurity. That plus these expectations can cause us to be over-discouraged by failure, to work hard to overcome our sense of insecurity, and resulting in burnout. So the problem is more insecurity coming from a very competitive type of culture, celebrity type of culture, rather than hard work. And so I think, of course, we can't, the Bible says we have to have a Sabbath, and that's something that we have to religiously keep. So that's my basic sort of idea, that's where burnout comes from. That's too simplistic. Okay, that's one reason, right? Related to hard work. So let me share. I'm going to look at, use Colossians 1:29 as sort of a base for what I'm sharing today. Next time, I want to share about the whole question of maintaining our joy. How can we maintain joy with all the disappointments? Another reason, I think, for people losing their freshness is the disappointments and the disillusionment that they face in ministry. So today, it's on hard work. Right? In 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 27, Paul talks about his own life in terms of toil and hardship, many a sleepless night, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold and exposure. Today, if a Christian worker said that about himself or herself, that person would be rebuked and recommended to go for counselling, because clearly this is not God's will for you. I did a study some years ago of every time the New Testament uses Christ as an example for Christians to follow. And I came up with about 29 examples. 23 have to do with servanthood and suffering. 23 So if you want to be like Jesus, we have to, be ready for servanthood and suffering. So Paul, in the passage that I mentioned, talks about evangelism and nurturing. He says his goal is to proclaim Christ so that we can present them faultless or rather perfect before Christ at his second coming by implication. So he says, Colossians 1:29, for this, that is evangelism and discipling, I toil, struggling with all the energy that he powerfully works within me. For this, I toil. Evangelism and discipling is hard work. We have to go after people before they come to Christ and after they come to Christ. Care for them like parents. So I think this is one reason why so many people talk about the need for evangelism and discipling, evangelism among outsiders and discipling, but few people do it because I think it's just too inconvenient in our efficiency-oriented world. Let's look at this word toil. To this I toil. The word is kopiao in Greek, and the dictionary says it takes the meaning of work hard, labor, become tired, grow weary. This noun is used twice. The noun is used twice by Paul autobiographically. He uses that noun too. So it's talking about physical exertion. And Paul obviously didn't consider it a sin to be tired. John Wesley said when he was an old man, I am weary in the work, but not weary of the work. I think that's the situation we'd like to be in. Weary in the work, no doubt, but not tired of it, not weary of the work. And when we are counseling people and discipling people, very often I tell myself, why does this guy have to act so stupidly when I am so busy? I just don't have the time. But if you're a spiritual parent, when the child is sick, the mother doesn't say, it's not in my diary, I don't have time for this. We have to give the time. That is part of toil in ministry. Our spiritual children, when their problems come up, we attend to them. It's the same with the ministry of the word. Y'all are ministering the word, evangelists are ministering the word, but they have to know the word. And finding out about the word is difficult work. It's one of the biggest challenges I face because if you want to find out, sometimes you get polluted trying to find out what people are thinking. It takes so much time to understand what's happening. And then we have to study the word. And when we do all of that, we can end up exhausted, tired. I must say that handling the word, because we believe in the word, I think belief in the power of the Bible has a rejuvenating effect to us. George Muller said, the scriptures have a recuperative power upon our lives. And there is something about preparation to preach which rejuvenates because we're handling truth. Sometimes I'm really discouraged and I don't want to preach, but what to do is my job. I have to do it, So I take my notes and start reading the notes and I get fired up again. This is true. This is true. And I can tell this to people with conviction. So I preach and come back to the discouragement. But while you're preparing, there is energy that comes. But it's hard work. George Campbell Morgan, who was minister of before Lloyd Jones at the Westminster Chapel, he was asked the secret of his success as a preacher. And he said, I always say to them the same thing: work, hard work, and again work. So we toil. Now I must say that we must devotedly take a Sabbath. I say that again. I think that's something very important for us. We do that as an act of faith, however busy we are. If God has told us to do this, He has told us to do this because He thinks it's right for us to do that. So as an act of faith, we take a Sabbath and we affirm, Lord, it's not I, but you who's doing the work. So that's important. We need to delegate work to others. We are not messiahs who have to do everything. We delegate things to others. But so therefore we give priority to nurturing people to whom we can share our responsibilities. But we know that if we live this balanced life, and I think the balanced life for most of us is the cross. Our cross is a balanced life. The children are crying on one side. We have to prepare messages on the other side. And then there are all these people calling out for needs. To doing all of this is difficult. But if there are sources of renewal within that balanced life, we will be refreshed by the tension. We will be refreshed by God providing answers to the struggles that we have. So, we toil. Now, let me say, however, that we have to listen to the warning signs. There are warning signs when you're toiling. An unusual weariness that hits you. This comes to me quite often. I feel unusually weary. And somehow I arrange my schedule so that I can take a day or two just away. If we are that, then listlessness, no energy, feeling that you don't have. That's a sign from our body. We need to listen to our bodies. The body is saying something. So we need to do that. Irritability. When my colleagues are getting unusually angry, I ask the question to myself, not to them, has this guy fallen into sin? Or is he not having enough sleep? Irritability can be. Now, when we are like this, we can go on working hard. Work. That's the insecurity coming in. We work hard. And doing that, we can do irreparable damage to our body and our mind. It is dangerous to live in a perpetual state of emergency. I can tell you that because we've had wars, we've had riots in our country, we've had tsunami, and during those times, you're just working, but I make sure that our staff don't live in a perpetual state of emergency. They have to take off and listen to their bodies. So sometimes we push our bodies to an extreme. We may have to push our bodies to an extreme for a short period. But that's the exception, not the rule, not our normal way of living. So we listen to the body. Then we take seriously warning messages from our family members. They are the ones who see us closest. And family members are the most important people in our lives. And if they are worried about our lifestyle, then we need to take it seriously. Sometimes we are so involved in our work that we don't understand the extent to which we are hurting ourselves and our families. Our loved ones notice the damage. And very often we disregard what they have to say. Very often we say, don't you know that I have to obey God's call? And I have worked more with men than with women. So the man says this to the woman, and the woman was the best girl in the youth fellowship. She was the truly committed Christian. So as a committed Christian, How is she to fight with God? She says, okay for 10 years. After 10 years, she realizes this is not God's will. This is his own disobedience. This is wrong. We are having an epidemic of this problem in Sri Lanka at the moment, where wives are upset with their husbands. One of them, a pastor's wife, has become a Buddhist and filing for divorce. Others are really struggling. And so we need to listen to them and talk regularly with our family about our schedules. There are ones in our family who are sensitive to this. I have a son and a daughter. My son is in ministry. He never scolds me for working too hard. But my daughter, she will ask me questions. Why are you doing this? Do you have to do this? And I have learned to listen to my daughter and, of course, my wife. Regular conversation promotes understanding and prevents the growth of bitterness. If you sense that your spouse is in a bad mood, I can bet that the temptation you will have is to ignore, because it's too painful to bring it up. It's too unpleasant to bring it up. But that decision could be disastrous. We could be helping to grow a mountain of bitterness. So we need to nurture our family's understanding of what we are doing as one of our key responsibilities in ministry. Similarly, there are warning signs that can come from accountability partners, close friends, supervisor, counselor. These are people who can help us realize if we are going. So others see what we may not see because we are so gung-ho on what we are doing that we may not sense that. Okay, so he says he toils. Then he says, I struggle. The word struggle is one of these nice biblical words, agonizomai. It's used for wrestling. Epaphras is wrestling in prayer for you. That word struggle talks about the battle for souls. If the toil is physical energy being used up, the struggle is more spiritual and emotional draining that takes place in the process of ministry. And that ministry can be emotionally draining. Paul tells the Galatians, my little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. Elsewhere he said, there is the daily pressure of my anxiety for all the churches. Who is weak and I am not weak? Who is made to fall and I am not indignant? Ministry is emotionally and spiritually draining. And, many of us, I working with Youth for Christ, we are working with totally unreached people. And their backgrounds, they don't know Christian values at all. And we are called to disciple these people. I constantly tell our staff, one of our callings is to do what Jesus did for us. He bore our shame. In the same way, we bear the shame of the young people we disciple. They go to churches and mess up. They try to change the church overnight. And then whom do they blame? Youth for Christ. But that's part of ministry, working with people. But it's difficult. Today, many people think it's a waste of time. And many miss opportunities to nurture powerful and effective servants of God because they were rough diamonds. And they didn't see the diamond because they were looking at the roughness outside. So, you seek to restore a backslidden Christian. When a person backslides, guess whom he or she is going to blame? First, the one who is discipling that person. We are the ones who get the blame when they backslide. And they resist our intervention. When we are praying for the deliverance from demon possession, that is a exhausting work, because we have found demons don't immediate. I don't know how Jesus did it. He said one word and they went. But in Sri Lanka, we find sometimes you have to pray a long time before people are delivered from demon possession. Evangelistic preaching is a battle, because we are storming the gates of hell. Praying for people's needs can be a battle, because you don't know how to pray and you're pleading with God, Lord, help me to pray the right thing, pray the right prayer now with this person who needs my prayers. Preaching is a battle. And after the battle, we can be spiritually, physically, and emotionally drained. And when we are in that situation, Satan can hit us. You know, I read about a pastor who visits a prostitute on Sunday night after the strenuous Sabbath day, hard work of Sunday. He would go there because, he was vulnerable. Adrenaline has been pumped into his system. He's wide awake, and there's a letdown after heavy work. So we need to be prepared for battle. Be prepared for the downtime after the battle. I have a few accountability partners and my wife, and they know. I told them when I came here, I'm in a hotel, there's a television here. After 10 o'clock, I won't be putting on the television. They know that. Because I know it can be dangerous. And after preaching, it can be doubly dangerous. So prepare for battle. It's a battle. And we need to be alert. We need to be wise in the way we battle. Then Paul says, while tiredness and struggle is inevitable in ministry, it doesn't need to be crippling, because God's grace is sufficient and God is there to help. Colossians 1:29, again, back to the same verse. He says, I toil and struggle with all his energy that he powerfully works within me. Energy for the hard work, power for the struggle. So God gives us strength to do our toiling and power to do our struggling. God provides for our challenges. Of course, on our part, we must ensure that we are always obedient while we are working. You know, we have had a lot of casualties recently in our country. In a situation of war, a lot of unbalanced things happen. We had a war for 30-odd years. And along the way, living in refugee camps and things like that, things happened which shouldn't have happened. And then it comes out. And we have found many of our battle-scarred heroes have got scarred beyond repair. Well, not beyond repair, but God can repair. But serious problems have happened. So we have to be very careful for toil and struggle. So we have to be, on our part, make sure that God's grace comes into our life. That's one of the important things. And we need to discipline ourselves. That's why we talk about spiritual disciplines, are means by which grace comes into our life. I'm a rather indisciplined person. I don't work according to schedules. I hate to shave, but I have to do it. not like these guys who can manage without shaving. And I'm not a routine person at all. I have a staff colleague who looks after my vehicle, and he makes sure that everything is looked after, because if I was left to look after it, it would have been a disaster. So I'm not at all a regular person. But for the last 60 years, I'm 74 now, I gave my life to Christ when I was 14. For the last 60 years, there's one thing that I've tried to do without exception, and that is to have my time with God, reading my Bible and praying. And after 60 years, it is still a battle, because I'm not a routine person. It is still a battle. But I know that if I neglect it, I'm finished. If I neglect it, I'm finished. I have another chapter in this book talking about how we can thirst, how God gives us a thirst that becomes a means through which we receive from Him. And one of the things we have to really pray, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. And very often our thirst comes from times of deep despair that God could use to create within us, like Psalm 42. As the young deer pants after the water brook, so my soul longs for you. That was when God seemed to be so far away. And He said, why are you cast down, O my soul? 3 times in Psalm 42 and 43. He keeps repeating. He's preaching to Himself. Why are you cast down? So God gives us a thirst that makes us feed ourselves from the Word, from books. I try to read an article every day. I'm a slow reader, so it's a little difficult. But a lot of the things that are said now are strategic. And I think it's very important that we be strategic, that we know the world we are in. And a lot of the reading today is strategic. Not enough is intended to feed the soul. There was a pastor who left the ministry, and he left his books in the church library, in the church office, when he left the ministry, when he left and went. The next person came and looked at his books. The early books were, for the most part, theology, Bible study, exposition, that kind of book. The later books were almost all strategy, leadership, management. Now, these things are important, but we must feed our souls. So we have to make sure that this energy that God is there to give us truly comes in to our lives. So when I talk of freshness, I'm not talking about, this is another chapter, by the way. I didn't realize that I was finishing this so quickly. So I can tell you a little more. When I talk about freshness, I'm not talking about being an enthusiastic over your job. There are, scientists, actors, sportspersons who are enthusiastic about their job, and they're not necessarily Christian. I'm not talking about having a bubbly personality, always happy. Some great people struggled with depression. Martin Luther, Charles Spurgeon struggled with depression. Some of the most beautiful, deep lyrics in the English language were written by William Cooper. God moves in a mysterious way. Hark my soul, it is the Lord. He had severe depression, suffered from severe, pathological. It was clinical depression. Tried to commit suicide. But God used them to the end. I think what we mean when we talk about freshness. Not climbing the ladder, ecclesiastical ladder. One of the freshest books about Christianity, about the Christian life, comes from a guy who was a dishwasher, Brother Lawrence. He was a dishwasher and he resented it until he was in a monastery, until he had an encounter with God. And then he realized that even the washing of dishes, he does for God. It's for God. It's not for himself that he does it. So it's not climbing the ladder. It's not spiritual success, earthly success. Because some of the greatest heroes of the faith, we are going to find out only when we get to heaven. You know? I call my wife my hero. She's not here, so I can tell her that. I can tell you that. She has prohibited me from saying it. But when I go to heaven, I know that she has a much higher place than me in heaven. Because, so it's not, those are not the measures of success in the Christian life. The measure of success in the Christian life is when we sense that we are being led by God. When we have a sense of joy over our call. When the problems of life have not overwhelmed us to the point that we are bitter, we are sad. You can't be in ministry without being sad, because all the time we are meeting with pain, all the time. We are sad, but we are not bitter, because the love of God has been shed abroad in our hearts. So that is out of what we minister out of. Okay, let me close with a story, and then we can have some discussion. That explains this whole thing of toil, struggle, and then energy and refreshment from God, power from God. The InterVarsity in USA has a conference called the Urbana Missions Conference, and I had to go there to do a Bible exposition. And I left on Christmas night. So it was a very busy time. I had to preach in our church. I'm not a pastor, but I'm very involved in my church. So I had to preach there on Christmas Day. We have Christmas Day services in our country. And I had to preach, so I was preparing. I had a lot of programs before that. And I was very tired. And I was preparing my sermon. I finished at about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I went to sleep, hoping to have about 4 hours of sleep and then go to church in the morning. And shortly after I went to sleep, there was a knock at our door. It's about 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. And I went to the door. And they were our neighbors. They are very poor people. They didn't have electricity at that time. The little baby was having a stomach problem. And in the dark, they had only a little oil lamp. In the dark, they had given the child skin lotion, thinking it was a drink, medicine for the stomach. And they said, "But what can we do?" So I said, let's go to the hospital. So I took them to the hospital, and when poor people come to the hospital, they don't care. So I knew I had to stay till everything was done. And so we waited, and made sure that everything had been done properly. Came home, no time to sleep, went straight to church. And then came back home, had Christmas lunch. And we open our windows like this. I noticed that the Europeans open like this and like this. We open it out, right? Because we don't have air conditioning in our houses. So we closed all our windows, which suggests we are not at home. Put the van in the garage and went to sleep. Because I was afraid, you jet lag and so many hours. When you try to preach with jet lag and without sleep, it can be, disastrous. You say the wrong things and all of that. So I was afraid. So I went to sleep. And few minutes of sleep, another knock at the door. Somebody had come to see my brother who was living next door, and he wasn't there, so he came to see me. And went back to sleep, another knock. Then I realized Christmas afternoon is not a good afternoon to sleep. So I called we got together as a family and we played some games. Then at midnight, I went to the airport, and the poor Sri Lankan Airlines flight was a disastrous loss on that particular flight. There were about 350 seats and about 50 passengers. And I had 4 seats to myself. I went to sleep when we left Colombo, got up just before we landed in Amsterdam. I have never slept like that in my life on a flight. And I realized God knew. When that person came to our house, God knew. And so God has a way of meeting our needs. On our part, we have to be careful not to work in a way that dishonors God. And a lot of it comes out of wrong motives, out of our own insecurity. And we have to deal with those. Okay, that's what I wanted to share. If you have anything to say, I think... Thanks for the question. I think we have all got to decide what our Sabbath is. And working 6 days and taking a Sabbath doesn't mean that you can't take rest on some other day also. So I think that is there. My own Sabbath is, by the way, I find it hardest to have my devotions on my Sabbath because I'm relaxing that day, and I'm not alert, as I usually am. I'm not usually alert, but, at least. So I try to change my devotions a bit. I like music, so I like to sing a little extra during my worship time. But I must say that much of my Sabbath is doing housework. Because for my wife, that is what she needs, and I'm busy on the other days. So I do a fair amount of housework. In fact, I normally walk every evening, but I don't walk on the Sabbath because that day I want to leave for the home. And so I think we all have to work out what is special. I try to do a little theological reading on the Sabbath. Now that is just not work, but just for my own pleasure, to do a little pleasure type reading. So I do that. The night before the Sabbath, I might watch a movie because my Sabbath starts earlier on. And I like mystery things. Unfortunately, these British mysteries, which I like very much, we don't get in Sri Lanka. We get the other ones. Maybe I'll do that. So I just try to make it a little special, And on Sunday, which is not my Sabbath because I'm preaching very often on Sundays. On Sunday, my wife and I do we pray every day, but on Sunday we try to give a special time of prayer, and we do some reading, we do some biblical reading, and then we will. So that's a little mini Sabbath on Sunday. I might say that Jesus said the story of if your cow has fallen into the well. So sometimes there are emergencies. And, if something like that is there, we need to respond. So,
I might ask this because I'm younger. Can you explain a bit of the growth that you experienced that you can share this with us now.
Okay. Growth-wise, I mean, I came from a Christian home, so I had it was a advantage and a disadvantage. But I think it was mostly an advantage to come from a Christian home. So my growth was, firstly, I think, coming to understand that God had a plan for me. I come from a fairly brilliant family, and I was the only one who was not brilliant in the family. Others were good students, good sports persons, but I was mediocre in everything. And because of that, I struggled with a sense of inferiority. So a lot of my growth was coming to understand that God loves me. And that has been the thing that drives me even now. I told my wife that I want a song sung in my funeral. I am so glad that my Father in heaven tells of his love in the book he has given. Wonderful things in the Bible I see. This is the dearest, that Jesus loves me. Now that's So I think my growth has been trying to understand the gifts, that God truly loves me. God has given a job for me to do for him, that I am a significant person. So that was one. But there are other areas of growth that I am still battling with. Indiscipline, because the indiscipline can result in my not doing things I should do and then having to stay up all night trying to finish an assignment on time and things like that, which is not discipline or hard work, it's just indiscipline. But also, I didn't... I was very fortunate to be converted before I could go into sin, serious sin. Of course, there was a lot of sin. But I work with a lot of people who have been in serious sin. So I have to know about sin. And that has been a major challenge in my life. Because you try to watch, you follow in these news. If you want gossip, just open any of the news things. And you find enough gossip to keep you, and about this affair and this thing and that thing. And it's so easy in our quest for knowledge to make ourselves impure. So in those areas, the great help in my growth has been my friends. I have a group of people. Actually, we had 6 of us, or 7 of us, and 4 of them are in heaven now. That's the problem with getting old. But 3 of us still remain. 4 of us still remain, and 2 of them gets a weekly report from Covenant Eyes about where I have gone on the internet, and if I have wasted time, I will tell them I spent too much time. This morning, I sent a letter to my wife and to them. I spent too much time on Google because I can waste my time on Google, So, and if I go beyond the bounds, they will discipline me. I can't take major assignments for a certain period of time. And so I have found my friends have had a huge part to play in my growth, in holiness, and also in not being bitter. When I have a friend to share, when I'm upset, having a friend to share, you can't be angry with humanity when one person at least listens to you. So that becomes a switch to clear your anger. So these are the main areas of my life where I have seen growth. I had to see my own assessment of who I am, my battle for purity, and I can't remember the other one, whatever. Yeah. I think, that's why, I said earlier, taking a Sabbath is an act of faith. It's a proclamation of faith that it's not us, but God who is working. And I think in faith we obey. And so I don't know what else to say. I mean, I think sometimes we are too busy. I mean, in the sense the structure under which we work keeps us too busy, which is wrong. And there has to be a change in our structure, in our schedule, in our plan, in our responsibilities. So that may be one, but I think basically it's an act of faith. We have to decide. Before I came here, my grandchildren who live far away were coming for 2 days. And I want to somehow finish my preparation for this conference before they came, so that I'm a retired man, so I can give 2 days for them. So I worked, and somehow finished all the preparation. And then I had 2 days with my grandchildren. But it was an act of faith. God will look after. I have to do my part. But after that, you leave it to God to take. So I think we need, it's an act of faith. A Sabbath is an act of faith. Right. Yeah, I think one of the big challenges in today's world is that after adrenaline is pumped, for relaxation, we go to adrenaline pumping recreation. That's one of the big problems. So we might watch a violent film that increases our stress level. So in my case, it is just that I have to be careful. I just try to be careful. Now today, I'm speaking in the evening also. So I can't watch the television because it's too late, I have promised. So I have to do something, and probably I'll read. Now reading is one of those adrenaline lowering things, So I think we have to just think about our own person and make sure that we don't increase, but try and decrease the level of our stress. In that. So, yeah, I used to take, nowadays you don't have CDs much, and I'm not into Netflix and all of that. But I used to take British mystery stories with me, videos. Miss Marple, Murder, She Wrote, Lewis, and things like that. Because I found that, even though it has to do with murder, I found it relaxing. Our fallen natures, I guess. So I think we have to find out what we need to do. If we can be with friends, that's ideal. I have preached sometimes at a conference in England called the Keswick Conference. And after that, in the evening, all the speakers get together and we really have a jolly time, And these are ways in which, you can